Hey guys, how's it going? My name's Tristan. In this video, I'm going to go through my bike packing setup. I'm going to show you everything I pack, where I pack it, and why I pack it. This video has been requested for a long time, so hopefully you find it useful. For context, I've been cycling around the world since 2015. I've covered about 70,000 kilometers through about 70 countries. I ride all sorts of different terrain, including a lot of rugged single track, so I need my setup to be very versatile. I've tried a ton of different bike setups over the last 7 or 8 years, and this for me has come out to be by far the best. When I started out, I was using the classic touring setup with 4 panniers, and then I gradually transitioned. I've used the more modern bike packing setup for a while, and what I've ended up on is this kind of hybrid setup. With bike packing setups, it's always a balance between convenience and weight. The modern bike packing setup is super light and really good for technical riding, but it's also a pain in the ass to pack because you have very little space and you have to play Tetris to a very high level to make it work. It also makes packing up in the morning quite irritating because you have to pack it very, very carefully every time. And over a long tour, that definitely starts to get irritating. The amount of time you have to spend packing and trying to get things quickly can also be quite inconvenient. The bike touring setup with the panniers, however, much more convenient, but on the other hand, it's also far, far heavier, and it's nowhere near as good for technical riding. And if you start having to do hike a bike, it becomes quite inconvenient quite quickly. So for me, this is the perfect compromise. I have almost as much convenience as a 4 pannier setup, but it's far, far lighter and far more capable when it comes to technical off-road riding. So this is the setup that I've been using for the last 2 or 3 years. I've been super, super happy with it. I am going to be making a few additions to the setup for my next trip, which is going to be Alaska in the summer, and I will be going through those additions at the end of the video.
In the interest of full disclosure, I will say that some of my equipment was sent to me for free, but I'm not receiving any money for making this video, and being a perfectionist, I'd much rather pay full price than use something subpar, so you can be confident that everything I'm using is awesome and I'm not just using it because it was free.
Right, so let's dive into the pack list. If I start with what I wear when I'm on the road, helmet, pretty straightforward. This is a Giro fixture MIPS helmet, fairly cheap, but it works pretty well and it's comfortable. Gloves, pretty basic. These are grip grab gloves. Try saying that 3 times drunk. What I'm wearing now is pretty much what I cycle in every day. Starting from the top, this is a merino wool long sleeve top from Handlebar. I massively swear by merino wool. I'd never wear anything else on tour. It really is just so much better than any other material. It keeps you cool when it's hot, it keeps you warm when it's cold. It breathes really well, it dries super fast, it's very comfortable, and the best thing about it is it doesn't smell, so you can wear it for days and days and you won't get any kind of funky smells coming out of it. Merino wool is obviously a little bit more expensive, but it's totally worth the money. This one is from a company called Handlebar in the UK, which I got into about a year ago. These are the best ones I've ever found. They're incredibly comfortable and insanely soft. It actually feels kind of like silk. Shorts, I don't wear padded shorts. I've never really needed them with the Brooks saddle, so I just wear whatever shorts I have. These are some cheap, I think, Pilates shorts from Decathlon. Main thing for me is they just want to have a bit of stretch and they also want to have good zippered pockets. Merino wool socks, again, merino wool is the best way to go. And these are Specialized Rime flat mountain bike shoes. I only bring 1 pair of shoes when I tour. I don't have a second pair or sandals or anything, and I prefer flat pedals partly for that reason. So these are great for cycling in. They're incredibly grippy combined with a good mountain bike pedal, but they're also great for off the bike stuff. So I can happily hike for days in these. I can go running in these, and they look relatively normal, so they're decent for just walking around town. Okay, I'm gonna go straight into the backpack next. So this is a 35-litre waterproof backpack from Sea to Summit, the Flow 35. I really love going with a backpack on a rear rack as opposed to a seat pack. You have a lot more capacity and it's not that much extra weight. And I like to do a lot of side activities off the bike. I like to do multi-day hikes, and I'm also the kind of person that often ends up doing hiker bikes. So this is incredibly convenient. When I have hiker bike, I can just quickly take the backpack off the rack and wear it, which makes hiker bike far easier. Then I also have a hiking backpack ready to go for multi-day hikes if I want to do them. It also has the benefit of making flying with a bike far easier because this is big enough that I can carry basically all of my stuff in this backpack and bring it on as carry-on, and then I can just have the bike in a bike box and I don't need to pay for any hold luggage, which is great. I've used a bunch of different backpacks over the last few years. I still haven't found one I'm 100% happy with. This one is pretty good. For me, it just wants to be in the 30-35 litre range, so I have enough capacity to carry food for 3 or 4 days on a multi-day hike. Having a waterproof one is super nice because I can just stuff everything into the backpack without having to worry about dry bags or a liner, but you do also have the option of just using a normal hiking backpack, whatever you have. Use a liner to keep everything dry, and that would also work just fine. Using the magic of editing, I'm going to take the backpack off the rack, unpack it, and then I'm going to show you everything that I pack into it by putting it in, which I think is going to be more helpful. Okay, so the backpack is off the rack and unpacked. One thing to say first, I've had a bunch of questions about this. This little piece here that I have on top of the rack, this is just the back piece from an old backpack that I just took off. Basically, it's just a small piece of closed cell foam. I just have this cable tied onto the rack. The reason I use this is because it keeps the backpack clean and it keeps it protected from any sharp rocks coming off the tire. It also helps keep the straps out of the way, so I think for me it's worth the extra 50 grams or so. You could use basically anything for this. This is just what I happen to have. Okay, so this is the backpack emptied out. One of the really nice things about using a big backpack like this is that you have a really wide opening, so it makes packing super easy. All of my stuff in this backpack basically just gets stuffed down, makes it really quick. I don't have to roll anything. It all just goes in really quickly, which makes packing up in the morning really convenient. In the backpack goes basically everything that I don't need during the day. Once the backpack is strapped down on the rack, I can't access it without taking it off again. So the idea is I pack everything in here in the morning that I won't need during the day, and then in the evening I just take it off, unpack. So in here goes everything I won't need during the day. So that is my sleep system, my shelter, extra clothes, and generally anything that I'm not going to need regularly or at all while I'm riding during the day. To start with, I have a spare belt for my Gates carbon belt drive. I wouldn't bother taking this on a short trip, but on a longer trip, it's just nice to have the backup in case this one ever breaks. Very unlikely that I'll ever need it, but it's only about 60 grams, so it doesn't hurt to throw it in there. A couple of pairs of merino boxer shorts. When I'm riding during the day, I actually don't wear underwear. I just go commando because I find it works better for me. So the boxers are there basically for days off. Definitely a luxury item. This is a beard trimmer, Remington, nothing particularly special. It's relatively lightweight. The main thing with that is it charges by micro USB, which I have anyway. Definitely a luxury item, but on a really long trip, it's nice to be able to freshen up a little bit. My pillow is a Cedar Summit Aeros. Arguably a luxury item, but for me, it's worth paying about 60 grams to have a good night's sleep. At this point, what I would do is stuff in my sleeping bag. This is a Cedar Summit Spark SP4 down sleeping bag. This is actually a winter bag that's supposedly rated down to -15. I wouldn't take this on a summer trip. I have a different sleeping bag that's 3 season that I would take if it were warmer, but my last few trips have all been to quite cold places. I sleep pretty cold, so for me it's worth carrying a slightly warmer sleeping bag just to make sure that I'm cozy even if it drops well below freezing. With this, I'd be comfortable down to at least -10. This works pretty well. I can just unzip it when it's hot and I can still sleep comfortably in temperatures up to sort of 15, 16 degrees or so. My next trip's to Alaska where it's going to be cold, so I'm definitely going to be bringing this. Down sleeping bag should always be stuffed, not rolled, because it's better for the sleeping bag. The way that I pack this, I pack it with a fold, so I pack it kind of from the middle first, and then I just stuff it down into the sleeping bag. The reason that I put it in half first is because the next thing that goes in is my laptop. So this is a MacBook Air in a padded case, just a cheap padded case that I got from Amazon. The way that I pack this, I just stuff it down in the middle between those 2 folds of the sleeping bag. So the sleeping bag then kind of wraps around it, which gives it a lot of extra padding and protection. The only other thing I have in there is a USB-C SD card reader for memory cards from my camera and drone. Next comes my sleeping pad. This is a Thermarest Neo Air X Lite. Any inflatable pad, unfortunately, is eventually going to break. That's just how it goes. Thermarest are pretty good with their warranty. I think this is the 4th replacement pad I've had over the last 7 years. It's frustrating that they do break eventually, but for me it's still worth it considering how much more comfortable and compact they are than going with something like a closed cell foam pad. This just gets stuffed in as well. It's all extra padding for the laptop. Clothes, pair of trousers. It doesn't really matter what you use. These are just a pair of climbing trousers from Decathlon. Another long sleeve merino wool top from Handlebar. I always want to have one clean top to change into in the evenings to sleep in, and I can wear that on days off while I'm washing the stuff I'm wearing now. Second pair of shorts. These are just exactly the same ones as I'm wearing now in a different color. Basically, I'll wear these until they're dirty and then I'll change into these and wash these while I'm wearing these so I can just rotate between them. Spare pair of merino wool socks for the evenings and sleeping. Little microfiber towel for obvious reasons. You always want to know where your towel is. This is a little repair kit. In here I have a sewing kit, I have a tick remover tool, universal sink plug so that I can hand wash my clothes in the sink. I have some ibuprofen, I have my sleeping pad repair kit, and I have a few little plastic clothes pegs for hanging stuff up to dry. This is my toiletry bag, it's pretty minimal. I have toothpaste, my toothbrush with a little cap thing on it. I have a little pair of nail clippers and some roll-on deodorant, Old Spice, for the man your man can smell like. I don't use either soap or shampoo. If you stop using them at first, it's a little ropey, but once your body adapts, you just don't need them anymore and you can just wash with water, which is a lot more convenient. This is my insulated jacket. This is an Arc'teryx Atom LT hoodie. This isn't particularly special, but it does the job. Depending where I am, this might not be stored in the backpack. If I'm somewhere where I think I might need to access to this during the day, I'll usually store it in my handlebar instead, where I can get to it quicker. If I'm touring in a warm place where I know I'm not going to need this during the day, it'll sit in the backpack. Lastly is the tent. Currently I'm using the Durston X-Mid one-person tent, which is absolutely amazing. I'm super happy with it. insanely strong, it's very light, and it's very comfortable. Keep the poles and the pegs separate to the main tent body, which I have just stuffed into a dry bag along with a ground sheet. So that is the pegs and the poles for the tent. I'm going to stuff those down the side of the backpack. And lastly, I have the tent itself, which just gets stuffed on top. As I say, the general philosophy is you want to pack this in the order in which you're going to be putting stuff in there. So the tent is the last thing that I pack up in the morning, so that's the thing that goes on top. Everything in the backpack is stuff that I don't need during the day, so I can just strap it down and then forget about it. Generally, I'll just put it on the ground, put my knee down on it and just flatten it a little bit to help kind of get into a better shape. There's a couple of different ways that this can go on the backpack, but what I find is the easiest is if you just take the two straps, kind of crisscross them over themselves like that to keep the straps in the middle, and then you can just slide it onto the back rack and then just push it forward like that. This setup might not work so well if you're a smaller rider, especially if you're also on 29, because you do need a fair bit of clearance between the rack and the bottom of the saddle, but this does work really well for me. The straps that I use to secure the backpack are cheap Rock motorbike straps. I've just got two of those attached to the rack, and then I can just pull them over, and then I can get it cinched down super tight. And that keeps it really solid. It's not going to move at all, even on really rough off-road. I know that that's not going anywhere. I then just take the two straps and then just sort of tie them off to stop them from flapping around. I just do a little knot, and that's now really solid. That's not going anywhere. If you don't want to bring a backpack, you can just use a regular dry bag, which is going to save you quite a lot of weight. Although for me, the extra convenience of having a backpack is definitely worth it. Personally, for anything other than a short tour, I definitely think a rack is really worth it. What a lot of bikepackers will do instead of using a rack is add a couple of cargo bags onto the fork. But if you work out the weight difference, it actually comes out lighter to go with a rack and a dry bag than it does to go with a seat pack and two fork bags. And with this, you also get extra capacity, easier packing, and a hell of a lot more convenience. So for me, this makes much more sense. Okay, so let's move on to the frame bag. The first thing that I would normally have on top of my frame bag is my tripod, but I am currently using it to shoot this video. I use a Cirui carbon travel tripod, weighs about 900 grams. It's really good, it does the job. The next thing I have is my grab bag. So this is just a small 3-litre dry bag with stuff that I want to keep dry and I want quick and easy access to. First, I have my journal, have a Kindle Paperwhite. I like reading, so that is essential. These are two 20,000 milliamp battery packs. I do use quite a lot of power when I tour, and I really hate having to ration it. With these, I'm generally good for at least a week without having to worry about it too much, and obviously I can go quite a lot further if I'm more careful. 2 pens for writing. Lastly, I just have charging cables. There's my iPhone charger, and there's just a few other charging cables for other stuff that I don't need very often. So that's that for the dry bag. So next is my pump. That's a Design Micro Floor Drive, really good pump. So next is my drone and my remote. So that's a DJI Mini 3, along with the remote. I keep that in a hard protective case for obvious reasons. I have the remote set up with a Peak Designs leash strap, which I can easily disconnect and attach to my camera for when I want to have my camera on the strap. Most people obviously aren't going to carry a drone, but if you're into filmmaking, then these things are an absolute game changer. I also have another dry bag. Depending on the conditions, I will sometimes store my drone and my remote control in a dry bag because this particular frame bag is not 100% waterproof, and I don't want to take any chances with an expensive piece of equipment. Most of the time, the drone and remote controller are not in this because it makes getting to it a little bit more inconvenient, but I do just have this for if I'm riding through a few days of very heavy rain. Some more electronics. These are some spare batteries for my drone, and this is a 2 terabyte external hard drive. These are just stored in a plastic Ziploc bag for waterproofing. This is a power plug as well as the charging cable for my laptop. That's also just stored in a Ziploc bag for waterproofing. And lastly, at the bottom of my pack is the pinion lock ring tool, which just goes on my cranks there. I'm incredibly unlikely to ever need this, but it's the only part that is proprietary. So for me, it's definitely worth carrying that on a longer tour. That's it for the frame bag. I should say this frame bag is a roll top frame bag from Spoked. I'm a massive fan of roll top frame bags because I find you can fit more stuff in them and they're easier to use. Zippers are going to fail eventually, so with this, I know it's going to last a lot longer. Top tube bag, this is a bag from Handlebar in Argentina. If you're in South America, highly recommend checking them out. They make amazing bags. So I have first my headphones. This will usually be on my head when I'm riding. These are Shox Open Run Pro bone conduction headphones. They're really good because they mean I can listen to music or podcasts and also hear my surroundings, so those are really nice. Merino wool buff, often I'll wear that while cycling. Sun cream, sunglasses in a little microfiber bag. These are Sun God Zephyrs. Massively recommend Sun God. I've been using these for a few years and they're absolutely amazing, so I really like these lenses. This is my head torch. I just have this in a small bag. This is a Petzl head torch. Not really sure which one, but it works really well. USB rechargeable, which is great. Multi-tool, this is a Park Tools one. I'm probably going to be replacing this with something lighter actually soon. The main thing for me is that I want to make sure I have a number 8 Allen key so that I can remove my pedals using that if I need to. Leatherman's Squirt PS4, little multi-tool with a pair of pliers on there and also a pair of scissors, so that's really useful. Little spare disposable lighter. This is my locks. This is a Bordeaux Light 6055 folding lock. Choosing a lock is always going to be a compromise. A cable lock is basically useless, and something much heavier is going to be much heavier. This weighs about 450 grams and it should be strong enough to keep out a pair of bolt cutters or a very casual attack for at least a little bit. So hopefully this would buy me a little bit of time to come out of the supermarket and grab my bike. This is basically my tubeless tire repair kit. So I have a valve core remover tool in there. I have a bunch of bacon strips and I have the tool for putting the bacon strips into the tire. Lastly, just sitting in the front, I just have a little thing of hand sanitizer, a couple of spare straps. These are just useful if anything breaks. You can just use Voil straps or whatever you want, just come in handy. And finally, the last thing I have in here is just a tiny little rechargeable red light blinky for the back of my bike. I hardly ever ride at night, but occasionally, obviously, I'll want one of those. So that's it for the top tube pack. 2 bottles of water. These are 1 litre each. These are just Nalgene bottles. I keep them there. Makes it really quick to access. I really like those. On the front of the bike, currently, I have my iPhone 13 Pro on a quad lock out front mount. And then I have a Garmin Edge 530 on a Garmin out front mount. And then lastly on the bike, we go to my handlebar bag. This is actually a custom prototype from Spokes, but the bag I was using for 2 or 3 years before I got onto this one was the Jumbo Jammer from Roadrunner Bags. Absolutely awesome bag, so I massively recommend it. This one comes out quite a bit lighter and it has a few extra features that we're working on, but obviously this one isn't commercially available just yet. Firstly, I have these 2 stretchy side pouches, which I really like. So this makes it really convenient for grabbing quick access stuff. So on this side, I just have my water purification kit. So I have a Sawyer Squeeze water filter and I have a little Platypus 2 litre bag. If you're gonna get a Sawyer, I really recommend going with the Squeeze. That's the slightly larger one rather than the Sawyer Mini. I was using the Mini for quite a few years and it's absolutely crap. It clogs up all the time and it takes forever to filter, whereas this one is far, far better and it only weighs a bit more, so definitely worth grabbing one of those. This is my Leave No Trace kit. So that is a little titanium trowel from The Juice. Number 2, so that is for digging a little cat hole if you need to go to the toilet in the woods. And there's just a little bit of toilet paper in a Ziploc bag. On the other side, I have another long sleeve merino wool top from Isobar. Generally, if I'm going to warmer climates, I won't bother with this one. I'll just have the one I'm wearing and my spare in my backpack. But if I'm going to colder places, then I like to have an extra one so that I can double layer when I need to. Generally, I do prefer long sleeves because I find they're more versatile, but obviously in a hotter climate, I'll sometimes go with a t-shirt instead of a long sleeve, just depends on the trip. Next, if we go into the bag itself, the advantage of this kind of bag is that they're really, really quick to access. So I can just unclick that. Then I've got access to a huge amount of storage space on the front of the bag. Right now, this bag is actually mostly empty because this is where I store the majority of my food. I do have space for a little bit of food in my frame bag as well, but most of my food is going to go in here. So to start with, I have my cooking kit. This is an Evernew 900 milliliter cooking pot with a Sidewinder Tri alcohol stove on the inside. I really like alcohol stoves because they burn really clean and it's really straightforward. There's nothing to break and you can generally find alcohol in most of the world. I have this wrapped in a homemade pot cozy. Generally the idea is I bring my water to a boil, I put whatever food I'm cooking into it, and then once I've got it boiling again, I just turn off the stove, wrap this up in the pot cozy, and it can continue cooking without using up any fuel. So that is amazing. It saves a whole bunch of fuel and it makes cooking really easy. Everything fits into the pot. I absolutely love this system, so I would massively recommend it. Sun's out now, so I'm wearing these. That is just a little bit of plastic, which I use as a chopping board for vegetables. And that's 2 little pieces of titanium. I use that as the base for my stove. So this is all my bad weather gear. This is everything I carry most of the time. I will be bringing a few extra pieces for Alaska, but this is generally my go-to. First is my rain jacket. This is an old Artemis rain jacket from Marmot. Not anything special. I bought this in Buenos Aires and it was the only thing I could find and it does the job. The main thing I like about this jacket is it has armpit zips, which I consider to be really important in a rain jacket because they make things a lot more breathable. Next is a pair of Gore-Tex waterproof socks. I absolutely swear by these for when it's raining and it's cold. They don't necessarily keep your feet dry, but they do keep your feet warm when worn in combination with a good pair of merino wool socks. These are merino wool gloves from Defeat. Nice thing about these is you can still use your phone with them. I find with these I can keep my hands warm enough down to about freezing, so those are really good. And lastly, I have a pair of merino wool leg warmers. These are just cheap ones from DHB. I got into these a couple of years ago and I absolutely love them. They're so versatile. I can wear these when it's cold and I can also wear them in the rain. I don't usually bring waterproof trousers for a trip because I find that most of the time these will keep me warm enough that even though I'm wet, it's not a problem. My general philosophy with rain is that if it's going to be raining all day, you're going to get wet no matter what you do. So it's much more important to stay comfortable rather than to stay dry. So it's no problem if you're soaked through as long as you're warm. And these do a really good job of keeping my legs warm. They're also super quick and easy to take on and off. And unlike waterproof trousers, I find I don't overheat in them. So these are absolutely brilliant. When I'm not using these regularly, I just keep them in this little bag to keep everything compact. But otherwise, these will often be stuffed into the side pockets to make them even quicker to access. And then lastly, I have another little grab bag with a bunch of spares and tools for the bike. This is all stuff that I very rarely need, but I want access to it if I do need it sometimes. Here I have a little bottle of tubeless tire sealant, got a few extra cable ties, got a little thing of tenacious tape, that's gear repair tape, which is really helpful if you have any tears in any of your equipment. That is a spare pair of brake pads. This is a tiny ultralight tube. I run tubeless, but I'd always want to carry at least one spare tube just in case anything goes wrong. These are ridiculously small ones. I can't remember the name, but I'll put the name up on the screen. Again, hopefully I'll never use this, but one day I might really need it, and that is absolutely tiny. That's a little patch kit that goes with the tube in case I get a puncture while the tube's in there, which could easily happen, so that's worth having. A couple of tire levers, that's a tire boot, one spare tubeless valve, and lastly, that's just a little bag of bolts and nuts. I just want to have at least one spare for every bolt on my bike in case anything breaks. There's still a ton of space in here, so with this setup I can carry food for up to about 3 days pretty comfortably, and I can go a bit further, but then it starts getting quite tight and cramped. I have to start playing Tetris, but I absolutely love this bag. It makes it really, really quick to access. I can just roll it up and it sits there really, really tight and strong. It doesn't move around at all, even when I'm on single track. The last thing to show you is my hip pack, which I wear when I'm riding. This is a Dakine Hot Laps 5-litre bag, although I'm going to be replacing this pretty soon with a Rockgeist Big Dumpling, which will be waterproof. The main reason I have this is to carry my camera, which is a Fuji X-T4. It's not in here at the moment because I'm using the camera to shoot this. I also have a spare lens in here. This is a 35mm f2 prime. And the main lens that I've been shooting on for the last couple of years is a 16-80 f4, although I am also about to make some pretty big changes to my lens setup for Alaska. Other stuff I have in here is my passport, have my wallet. I normally carry a little Rode lapel mic, but I'm currently using that, but that would normally sit in there. Have a little Opinel pocket knife, and I have a little MSR salt and pepper shaker, Snow Peak titanium spork, and a backup pair of headphones just in case my first pair breaks. So that's just about it. That's everything I carry for bike packing. This setup has been absolutely amazing for the last couple of years and I've absolutely loved it. Gives me plenty of capacity. It's all pretty streamlined, but it's also pretty lightweight. Even though I'm carrying quite a lot of camera equipment, a drone and a laptop, I'm still able to lift this bike up over my head if I need to. And you'd be surprised how often you need to do that because fences exist. Everything here is really nice and durable, and I have the setup optimized for convenience. So anything that I might need to access during the day is going to be really, really quick and easy to access. It's also nice that it's a very dialed setup, so I don't have to have things dangling off the bike, which personally I don't like. Everything is nice and tidy. I think it's a great looking setup and it works incredibly well. In terms of water capacity, I've generally got 2 litres here on the front, and then I'll have a 1.5 litre plastic soda bottle on the down tube, which gives me 3.5 litres of water capacity for normal use. I also then have the 2 litre platypus bag, which I can store either in my frame bag or on the front. So that gives me about 5.5 litres of capacity, which is more than enough for normal riding. If I ever need more than that, I can also strap extra water bottles on top of the backpack on the rear rack. So last but not least, I mentioned at the start that I'll be making a few small additions for Alaska. So these are the things that I'm going to be adding for this particular trip in Alaska, which I don't normally carry. This is stuff I wouldn't bring on a normal trip, but Alaska is a little bit different, so this is going to be very helpful. First of all, I'm bringing a pair of extra large rubber gloves. These are just about the only gloves that will actually keep your hands dry, and I'm expecting a lot of rain in Alaska, so these are going to be much appreciated. On the same note, for Alaska, I will be bringing a pair of waterproof trousers. I'd never normally bother with these, but I'm expecting a ton of rain in Alaska, so these are going to be well worth having. This is a mosquito head net. I wouldn't bother with this on most trips, except if I'm going back up to Scotland, but I am expecting a lot of mosquitoes in Alaska, so that is going to be essential. And lastly, as far as equipment, the other thing I'll be bringing is a second 2 litre platypus water bag and a length of tubing. The reason I have this is it lets me convert my Sawyer squeeze into a gravity filter, so instead of having to squeeze it out manually, I can just hang one bag from my bike handlebar and gravity will just pull the water down and filter it without any extra effort. I wouldn't normally bother with this because I don't normally filter water that often, but in Alaska I am expecting to be filtering water basically every day, and it saves a lot of time, so for me it's definitely worth carrying that. The biggest addition for Alaska is that I am for the first time in many years going to be once again using panniers. These are mini nano panniers from Mountain Laurel Designs in the US. Panniers are very small, the capacity is only 6 to 9 litres, so they don't take up very much space, they don't get in the way with hiker bike, and they only weigh 140 grams each, which is pretty ridiculous for panniers. Main reason I haven't used panniers for the last few years is that they're very heavy and bulky, but these are insanely light and very small, so they don't get in the way. And it is going to be really nice to have all the extra capacity. I'm expecting quite a few stretches in Alaska where I need to carry more than a week's worth of food. And now that I'm also dragging a drone around, space is getting a little bit tight. So these are just going to give me a lot more breathing room and make packing even easier than it already is. So I think that is just about it. That's everything I carry and that's why I carry it. This setup works really well for me, so hopefully you found this video useful. Please do give this video a like and subscribe. It really helps me out with the YouTube algorithm. There's no such thing as perfect, and I'm definitely still improving this setup, so if you have any suggestions, I'd definitely be glad to hear them. Let me know in the comments what you think of this setup and if there's anything you would change. And if you have any questions, just let me know.